Hi guys, welcome back. So this is part 2, and as I said at the end of part 1, what we'll be trying to do this time is make the back area of the head fit better with the front area of the face. So at the moment obviously it's very offset because this is Ashley Young, this is Neymar, so we need to try and make sure this area fits better with this area, because we want to keep this area because of all the facial features which are about right based on the photo we've got in there. So let's start by just disabling the image in the right view by choosing axis and front, so then that limits it only to the front view, so when we turn it back it's disappeared. Right, so the next thing to do is to disable this layer hair underscore naught. What hair underscore naught gives you is basically just an overlaid texture over the top of the head. Simple as that. So we don't need to see it at the moment, so let's just disable that. So this is the area that we want to be working on at the moment, this particular object here. So if we click on side view by pressing 3, and then what we can do is we go into edit mode, so we can actually manipulate the polygons now. We'll limit the selection to visible, which basically means it will cull any back faces, which is really useful in terms of clarity, and we'll enable the proportional editing mode. And basically what this allows you to do is operate on an area of polygons rather than just a single vertex. So and basically it operates via a fall off, which you can see in this circle. If you imagine that in the center of the circle, it basically, as much as you move the mouse, it moves the polygon, and towards the edge it moves it a lot less. So you can do this sort of thing. When you first start editing a model, it's a really good idea to use as large a shape as you can get away with, just because you want to be making very, very general changes. You don't want to be manipulating, tiny polygons at the moment, because it will just give your model too much of an angular finish. Obviously, if that's the look that's needed, then you can edit that later, but to start with, just start moving things around, just so the alignment's a little better with the front mesh. So if you look at that now, it's already looking a little better. We can make that a bit smaller. So we can just pull that out. Oh, too much. Let's draw that back. And the same there. And immediately, that's looking a lot better already. As I say, the principle is just that you're just trying to get it to roughly fit, because after this point we're going to be doing a bit more editing. So let me just grab that front area and again use a very large selection just to bring that down, just so it joins right up. So there we go. It's looking better. It's not perfect, but it's looking better. So now what we do is we go into object mode down here, and we shift and right click the other element, and now what we want to do is join these two elements together. So what you do is you do Control and J, and that basically fuses the two meshes together. Now, one important thing to mention at this stage is never ever export the face or hair while you have meshes joined. If you do that, it will corrupt it all. You'll open up PES and it will be an absolute mess. So just don't do it. It's basically irretrievable as well, as far as I can work out. I've tried everything I can do when I've done it accidentally, and it's a nightmare. So don't do it. So the next thing we need to do is actually finish working on getting these joined. So we can now switch back to edit mode, and we've got all of these polygons now that we can play with. The one thing that we do want to do now is actually switch off proportional editing, because as we go around joining all these polygons to stitch them properly together, we don't want it affecting any others, because it will just move ones that we've already moved. The other useful thing to do at this stage as well is to actually switch on the snap tool down here, and obviously you want it snapping to vertex. So then what you can do is actually grab a vertex here with the right mouse button and just lock it to where you want. So you just go around very quickly. You don't have to be too precious about it. It's basically just about getting it to join. And do keep an eye on whether or not you might be selecting a vertex that's actually through the back of the mesh or something like that, because that does happen from time to time. and you can get all the way around and then suddenly realise that you've accidentally, you know, pulled a vertex from one side to the other, because the snap is pretty indiscriminate about how it chooses where it's going to work. So just make sure, just keep rotating and moving the view around just to make sure that you've actually snapped the right point to the right point. Sometimes you'll select the front, sometimes you'll select the back. I mean, it looks like actually most of these points are pretty much aligned, as they tend to be actually around the back of the head. You know, it's very rare that you'll find major offset issues. So you just keep realigning them. Again, even if they look joined, just join them up, you know, move it away, move it back, just to double check and make sure that they occupy the same space. Otherwise you will find that when you look at it in PES, it does look strange, and you have little gaps here and there, which is obviously not ideal. So hopefully these will be the last few points. So join that to there, to there, to there, to there, to there. So that should be all of it. So now we have basically pretty much a perfectly joined mesh, and because of the work that we did before we actually joined this back skull piece to this front part here, we've actually got a much smoother join than we might otherwise have, which means that basically rather than there being, you know, a very harsh angle from here, say doing that, we've actually got it so it pretty much flows straight through, which is the way a human skull should look. I'm just checking now to see whether there's any strangely aligned vertexes. It's a good idea when you've done this kind of operation just to pan around from a few different angles. You know, here, possibly borderline, I might fix that. Just move it in a little bit just to smooth it off. I think in general it's looking pretty good actually. I'm pretty happy with that. So now the most important thing to do after you've actually done this joining operation, and it's actually a skill that you might do 2 or 3 times through the course of actually creating a model, depending on how happy you are with your initial sort of reshaping, is basically you need to learn how to detach a mesh from another mesh. So even though these two parts have been joined together, the information is still there in terms of the two different structures, and by pressing Control and L together, it will select all of the vertexes that are joined within the same subgroup, and then basically what you need to do is press P, which will bring up this menu here, and separate by selection. Now what that does now is it breaks apart the mesh again, so you now have 2 separate objects, which is how it needs to be for when you export it. The only other thing that you might need to do now is actually rename some objects. So obviously this back piece here is not face 000, it should be hair underscore 1, and just double check the subname. Again, it should be hair.001, I believe. Let me just double check that. Oh no, maybe it's just hair underscore 1 again, I guess. And then make sure you delete any extra stuff that just appears. I don't know why it does that, but it does it. So that should be okay to then export. So if we export, nope, I need to make that visible as well. That's another important thing to remember. is you must make sure that all of the content has been made visible before you export. Obviously this is completely misaligned now from the stuff underneath it, but again, it doesn't really matter until you get to the very end, and you just sort of resize that and do what you want with it. To be honest, it's very rare that I actually use it for very much. So yeah, so if I just export that now, and export the hair as well, because we've actually updated that part, and just export the new XML as well. So that is now exported. I'm going to take a very quick break and then we'll see what that looks like in game, so you can see if it's worked or not. So I have now set up the mapping for the GDB and linked it to Marshall's ID, and here is the current result in game. So you can see that obviously it looks like Neymar at the moment because we haven't done any editing yet, and the skin is white, so that has to be set. But yeah, it is working. And if I go in and have a closer look at the face, you can't see any joins between the sort of back skull area or anything else, and you can still see the obviously misaligned overlaid hair piece at the top as well, just to prove that it is what we've just been working on. So this is fantastic. This means that it's worked. This means that we can get on and start doing our rough modelling and try and get somewhere. Alright, cheers guys. I'll be back with part 3 ASAP.